So in this video, we're going to talk about Niyi Osundare's play, The State Visit. So this is a satire of corruption and political repression in post-colonial Africa, particularly Osundare's own country of Nigeria. This play premiered in 1997 during the dictatorship of Sani Abacha, who I think took power in Nigeria in 1993, maybe 92, and ruled the country until 1998. So it was actually very daring to put on a play like The State Visit, which is so extremely critical of political corruption, political violence, etc., etc. So the play starts out actually at a state cabinet meeting. And visually, one of the first things that we see is the head, which is the head of the state. And he's described in the stage directions. The head, as he enjoys being called, is chronically obese and slumps in his monumental chair, breathing hard. He's in army uniform, preferably fatigue, but his hat is placed on the table before him, while the belt disappears in the generous folds of flesh making up his abdomen. So visually, the first thing that we see is this, because it's an individual actor, I hesitate to say symbol, but it is a symbol. Like the large physical body of the head represents conspicuous consumption, represents excess and gluttony, etc., etc. As we find out, this is in sharp contrast to what's actually going on in the country of Yanke, which is the fictional country created for this play, but that's more or less meant to represent Nigeria. But right from the beginning, we have that opening scene, and then we have the narrator character who comes up from the audience to address the viewers. And this is a very Brechtian technique. The narrator, the character who is outside of the action and who tells us what's going on and what the important lessons are. This is very, very Brechtian. So the narrator starts, "There's a land of two rivers, a land blessed with milk and honey, the softest and the healthiest of sunshine. But a few men fouled up the milk and mixed the honey with cow dung. Men who have power to act and not be questioned. Men who measure their own height by the genuflection of others." He goes on. And this is all interspersed with poetry. Some of it in, I think, Yoruba, but I'm not 100% sure. But it's interspersed with poetry, these sort of more expository components. So he says, after some poetry, "As I was saying, this land is rich in everything, but the wealth is in the hands of a few kings and queens. The only possession the people have in abundance is poverty. When we asked to abolish it, the kings say that poverty is a 7-letter word, a sacred number that no God-fearing nation can ever afford to miss. So the wealthy fester in opulence, the poor squirm in their poverty." And then he goes on in the next sections to name specific groups of people who are benefiting from this corrupt system. Building contractors, doctors, magistrates, journalists, business people, police workers, or policemen, port workers, university instructors, etc., etc. And he concludes this opening section by telling us that there are some people who have learned how to play the game of political corruption and who grow fat and wealthy at the people's expense. And that we're going to see some of those people now. And that's what we get in the rest of Act 1, is we get a scene in the cabinet where basically there's going to be a state visit by the head of state of a neighboring country. And the head of Yanke wants the celebrations to be opulent. He wants everything to be perfect to maintain the reputation of his country. The problem is they don't have any money to do this. So one of the options that's discussed, and actually they've just spent, one of the things we find out is the head, without consulting the Minister of Finance, took 3/5 of the wealth out of their treasury recently to buy a fighter jet that they don't need because they're not at war with anybody. And so the fighter jet, while the head claims that the maintaining peace requires continually increasing and improving one's armaments in order to deter others, maybe? He's not, I mean, it's kind of, he speaks metaphorically and basically says, we need to feed the machine of peace with tools of war. So, I mean, but this is clearly like a vanity project. Like, there's no actual need for this jet, but in the same way that the head of state wears this military uniform, he wants a large and impressive military that can do parades and things like that to honor him, as dictators tend to do. So they don't know where they're going to get the money to cover this state visit. There is a suggestion of going and asking for the money from America. The finance minister is opposed to this. In part, so he says, finance says, remember just last year we borrowed $200 million from, the head interrupts him and says, we did not borrow it. America gave it to us as thank you money for allowing them to use Birona as a military base. We can always ask for them for more. They are our friends. And finance says, our masters. Debtor and creditors are never equals. Debts eat away our freedom. Debts enslave our future. So this is a really important point. We've got the corruption covered. I mean, we know that this is going on. Not only have we seen head, we've learned that head has taken out 3/5 of the money in the treasury for basically a pointless vanity purchase. We know from various other things that have been said so far that corruption is rampant, et cetera, et cetera. Here, finance is bringing up the problem of neo-colonialism, which is often done through finance, through debt, and international financial organizations like the World Trade Organization, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund, all of which are effectively controlled by the global north and end up imposing disadvantageous conditions on the global south through debt, through the lever of debt. And that's something that was very, very much a concern, and still is very much a concern in Nigeria, because the country is extremely mineral rich and resource rich, but it's also very much indebted. And so, like many countries in Africa and throughout the global south, debt has been a means of eroding Nigeria's autonomy as a state. And so that's very much a concern here. We similarly get concerns about neo-colonial politicians a bit later, because at one point, one of the soldiers who's guarding the state, the cabinet room, drops his gun, and everybody panics. And then after a few minutes, when it's clear that there's no actual cause for alarm, the head gets back up and basically is like, oh, soldiers these days are so soft and feeble. Back when I was a soldier in the good old colonial days, and he actually says, when our country was still a colony, I used to stand at ease for several days in front of the Governor General's residence. And what a good loyal soldier I was. I polished the officers' shoes till they shone like a mirror. And basically he rose through the ranks by polishing the shoes of officers. Like, he became a general on the basis of his shoe polishing ability, which is of course a thinly veiled metaphor for licking the boots of the oppressors. And again, we've got this element of after national independence for many global South countries, many former colonies, dictators would often style themselves in the fashion of the occupying military, the imperial military. So when Head is wearing military fatigues, we should probably imagine these somewhat in the vein of British Army uniforms. So we've got all that element. We've got these clear sort of anti-communist things. We've got these clear various elements of repression. The journalist who comes in is bought off, and he prints whatever it is that the cabinet tells him to print, etc., etc. So this is the setup of the state visit, but it's not the only component of the play. In Act 2, we get a group of beggars. And the beggars are really, really interesting because they reveal to us, on the one hand, the contrast between the opulence and the exploitation of the wealthy and politically powerful versus what the common people experience, including like destitution, blindness, being cheated out of governmentally mandated disability compensation and things like this, as well as systematic rape and other violence. But the beggars also give us our first real indications of resistance, meaningful resistance from the people, because a policeman comes along intending to move the beggars along so that they can clear the streets for this state visit. And they tell him, basically they say, we don't have to leave. This is where we live, and there's nothing you can do about it. And he says to them, and the stage directions say, trying to laugh derisively, can't you see how powerless you are before the onslaught of the law? See, some of you are blind, others don't have legs to stand upon. And he laughs again. But then they tell him, we got Suli, Obi, Etim, Abake. And I'm just going to give you their lines because the sentiment is what's really important here. We're made of something the law can never conquer. We're the dust of the earth, the blue of a sunny sky, the seamless womb of the earth, the waters of the oceans, and shells worn smooth and hard by the waves, the cat's eye that defies the dark, the rags that outlive the robe. So in their assertion of powerfulness against the powerful, I mean, it's done through these really poetic images, but it's also about the centrality of the common people. Act 3 goes back to the cabinet, where basically the same kinds of things happen. We move along with the process of getting ready for the state visit. Act 4 takes us to a protest, where groups of people, students, beggars, market women, old men, etc., etc., enumerate some of the offenses of the regime. And that section ends with police firing into the crowd. But then we get Act 5, and the narrator is back. And once again, this is a very Brechtian component, because here the narrator goes beyond saying, here's what's happening and here's what it means. And he says, here's what you, the audience, should take from this. So there's that pedagogical or teaching component that's very, very typical of Brechtian drama. And I want to read you basically the whole final speech, which is all of Act 5. There's a bit here that is, I think, again, in Yoruba. And he says, thank you for sitting so patiently while we acted out a piece of dream. Yes, it's a dream now with its masks and painted faces, its props and parables, but it's a dream plucked from the rust and dust of our streets, from the tinsel glitter of powerful thrones. Who says there's something wrong with dreams, positive dreams? What is reality if not the shadow of a dream? What is idea if not the maturation of ideal? What you've just seen is a short chapter in a long dream. The people have shown their anger, the guns have answered. The outcome is so dramatically obvious. He points to the bodies of those who were killed. But Yankee land will never be the same again. In every village, every hamlet, the questions raised here are fledgling into birds which perch on every roof. Questions too many for the steel muzzle of the gun. The days of the lion are severely numbered. There is something in the human spirit that guns cannot kill. What you've just seen is a small fragment of an unfolding dream. This drama goes beyond the curtain call. This play does not end here. Thank you again. So again, in the context of the dictatorship of Abacha, this is a call for revolution. I mean, this is very daring, but this is a call for political resistance against an oppressive regime. And it's I think it's a great play. It's Brechtian, it's an agitprop style. It pushes the audience to join the resistance against this tyrannical power. A message we still need today.